You're listening to the Name Drop Podcast, the brainchild of Indie Consulting, a full-service marketing partner. We are here to reveal the industry experts and brilliant founders behind the marketing campaigns and brands you know and love. In a world where things change fast and marketing is the opposite of static, we are here with a behind-the-scenes look on marketing geniuses and how they find their inspiration, hoping to inspire you along the way. Hi guys, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. We are sitting down with a really interesting founder in the media space who has a ton to share with us on content marketing, how to build a community, and what it's looked like going from a creator to running and building a business. I think you guys will really enjoy the episode. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. It's so weird to be on this side of things.
I bet.
No notes in front of me, but I'm super excited to be here.
I know. Usually you have like a laptop. You have a whole setup, right?
Laptop, iPad. It looks like election night for me. I'm just like moving screens as I'm like talking to people. I have notes out or whatever. But no, I'm relaxed. This will be great.
It will be.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
So how's your day? How are you feeling?
Good. It's like that time of year where there's just nonstop track and field action happening week in, week out. And so I'm on my phone. Screen time is up through the roof right now. We've got a lot of travel over the next couple of weeks, but hanging in there. I think that's why it's important to strike a good balance between like work and then at the same time shutting things off, which is like, that's the hardest part, especially, being that I have a much smaller team. I'm not NBC or ESPN or anything like that. So, so hanging in there for sure.
Good. Exciting. So with all that going on, what are you thinking about? How do you prepare professionally for the next couple of months?
Yeah. So this is an important year for anyone who covers sports, especially like a lot of these passion-driven sports and the Olympic sports. So with track and field, like it finds its limelight every 4 years. And so for me, like it is a big opportunity to really, establish ourselves. I would say like really buckle down and like reaffirm that like we're the go-to place for like all things track and field news, commentary, analysis, results, and just sort of so with Paris coming up, it's a big opportunity for the athletes, but then at the same time a huge opportunity for a startup.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So without revealing yourself.
Yeah. Really hard, I guess.
Yeah. Oops. No, it's okay. Brag about yourself. What are you really good at? Yeah.
I guess I'm really good at finding an audience and informing them and educating them on all things running, track and field related, but especially empowering, the athlete voice, and at the same time, sharing athlete stories, but also getting people super excited about a sport like track and field, which doesn't have like the biggest, it's not the NFL, it's not Major League Baseball, but it is a very big, sport at the participation level in high school. And so there is an opportunity to build a fan base. And I think that's what I really love, is just sort of tapping into audiences to tell these stories that are oftentimes either not forgotten, but overlooked. And so, I work in a space where we get the limelight every 4 years, but then there's important work to be done in the years between. And so I really dig my heels in those years in between.
That's awesome. So you're a storyteller.
Yes, which it's like interesting because I find myself overusing that word so much.
Yeah.
I think everyone, it's either content creator, storyteller, and like I think it's a mix of both. I come from a journalism background, but I think I've definitely shed sort of a little bit of that part of my identity in this, switch I had in my career 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. And so it's hard because like I still have that journalistic instinct, but the way I approach storytelling and content creation is definitely more from a fan's perspective. And so it's okay to be excited. It's okay to pick favorites. It's okay to, spew your thoughts and takes. And so that's just, a big part of the way I see the average sports media consumer changing. And so you got to get with it with the times sometimes, because newspapers, magazines, like, they're having their struggles, but digital media companies, like, I think that there's a lot of potential there, especially with, sports is something that's never going to go away. And so you just kind of have to always be ready to pivot and, change strategic approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you ever listened to anything from Scott Galloway.
Love Scott Galloway. I'm a big pivot person. Yeah.
I was just listening to him on the Uncensored CMO earlier today, and he said that the one trait that he wants all of his kids to have is how to be a good storyteller. He was like, it will set you up for success in your life, from everything from like finding a partner to excelling in your career to having a good friend group. If you know how to do it, it's like the path to success. I
agree. And also because I think, like, when a lot of people think of storytelling, like, maybe there's so many different ways to go about doing it. You could be, a kick-ass videographer or director. You could be an excellent magazine writer. And that's like something that I kind of wanted for myself in my career for a long time. And I think, having gone to school for journalism and particularly focusing on writing, I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I always tell, like, a younger, demographic of content creators is, like, I think practice your writing, because writing's at the heart of everything. Like, in order to produce a great script outline for a video, you got to be a good writer. Like, to pop on social media, your captions have to be pretty good, and so there's writing involved there.
So true.
And yeah, so I mean, like, it's if you constantly are putting that into practice, I think, like, it will pay off dividends massively. Because if you're writing, I always thought of it as, like, if you're writing 200 words for, like, short breaking news like stories and all that kind of stuff, and you're just aggregating news, that's great. Those are just constant reps that I think, like, will make you stronger for the time that you attempt to write your first 2,000 word story and try and give it, like, the magazine type treatment. So I totally agree.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about, too, like, figuring out what your medium is and trying different types of mediums so that you can just align on your strengths of how do you best bring your stories to life. So it sounds like you guys are on the same page.
Yeah, it's a good person to be on the same page with.
For sure. So talk a little bit about the content marketing landscape today. Where do you source inspiration from? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's like you have to stay on your toes, I feel like, if you're in the content space, because the biggest thing, like, I think of, it's like most people right now, like, the biggest number of people are on TikTok, and then you read the news and there's, like, all this talk about the app going away or shutting down or whatever. And so that's concerning, right? To a lot of people who potentially make all of their money or some of their money off of that one specific platform. And so I am of the belief you can never really just anchor down on one place. And so strategically, with the work that I do, I look to not necessarily produce 20 pieces of new content across, different channels. I like to think of it as, like, let's do 3 or 4 quality things a day and then just redistribute them across all these variety of channels. So if you do an interview with someone and it's a podcast, like, you publish that podcast normally a lot of times just, like, in its entire, length, and then you can repurpose and redistribute that in so many different ways. There's a transcript that lives online on the website where the actual podcast player is embedded. There's a clip of it that could go pop off on either TikTok or Instagram, and you have to have a strategy of, like, how to post to both of those different places. You can make a quote graphic, and so, like, it's just sort of, the job just never stops when you just produce content for one place. Like, you have to think of, in a marketing way, like, how am I going to market this thing across a variety of different channels to get the most eyeballs on it? Who knows where it pops off? And so you have to cast a much wider net. And so I'm definitely of the belief that you can't just rely on one place, and you can't be lazy about it. Like, you should take the time to, it's going to take an extra 2 hours to polish off, a different Instagram caption than what your YouTube description is, or whatever it might be. Like, there's every single thing, like, but you learn through practice. And so you have to invest the time. and just do it that way and take cues from a variety of different people. I think like for me, when I first started, in trying to think of like what I wanted to mold my website off of and like with the approach that we had. And it was like, I'm a huge Bill Simmons fan and like everything that he's built with The Ringer. And I saw the way, the good things about the way Barstool Sports was like approaching building personalities within their ecosystem and how audiences would gravitate toward a specific influencer or personality within their space to deliver them sports news and takes and all that stuff. And so, that was what was lacking in sort of the sport that I was focusing on. And so it was very simple. It's like, let's just try and take cues from all these variety of different playbooks and bring it to a space that doesn't have that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you talk a lot about the work that needs to go into putting pieces of content across multiple platforms. How have you operationalized that? You mentioned you have a small team. I'm sure there was a time where you were doing all of it, right?
I think we're still sort of in that time. I think like it's one of the hardest parts of just like starting something from, the ground floor is just like you have to be versatile. And, I think that there might be people in my position who don't know how to make an Instagram graphic or the best, social practices or whatever it might be. And I think like I'm lucky in the sense that like I'm growing up at a time where I didn't need to go to college and take classes on how to live tweet an event or anything like that, which is like something that while I was in school, professors were trying to teach. And it's like I'd actually get a bigger benefit learning this in the actual sort of real world. And so behind the scenes, like on the outside looking in, you see an Instagram account that has 100,000 followers, like a bunch of content being pumped out. But it's a small team. It's myself, one or two other guys who are full-time. And then we've got a bunch of contractors that are on, deals for a year or two, or now it's been 3, and have just been reliable people who get the approach that we take to covering sports and and the news, where we have a different voice. We're not just kind of giving people, here are the stale facts. Sometimes it's got a little bit more excitement, a couple of emojis thrown in. And so that's, the hardest part for me was delegating a lot of those responsibilities. Now I'm at a point where maybe I don't produce my own podcast, but I was a control freak with that for the longest time. I surrender the keys to the Instagram and Twitter when there's a big event, because I've got to be the person going out and getting interviews. And so, when I try and remember like what the early days of doing this were like, it was, I don't understand how I would have been able to take the approach that we do to covering events now, without a team. And so sure. The team is, really important, but talent ID is really hard too, of just finding, you can find a lot of people who have, that, the credentials. I went to journalism school, or I, ran in college, or whatever it might be, but you have to understand our tone and our voice and our personality and mesh with that really well in order to have it translate and fit into just kind of the team of people that we have. And so that's a hard part too. It's just like I get a lot of resumes and emails from people, and it's so nice, but I do have to turn away a lot of people too, because it's like we're looking for people who are ready to have fun, I think, as well, and in the way that we do it.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's important. I mean, the personalities, you can have the perfect resume, but if you don't have the right personality, or you can't be adaptable into the existing team, it's not going to work. Yeah,
and it's hard because, I'm definitely one of those people who likes to create opportunities for as many people as I can. Because, when I started doing this, I was 19 years old, and I was very fortunate. There was an opportunity at a place that was still kind of growing at the time, and I fit right in. So in sort of that Guy Raz, just like, what's the combination of hard work and luck? For me, there was definitely a lot of hard work, but also I got lucky in terms of timing. And when I found, just places and opportunities. So, I get that. And so, it's important to find people who will gel well with your team chemistry. And, I try my best to create some of those opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. So talk a little bit about, I mean, you all create such a large volume of content.
Mm-hmm.
How do you prevent creative fatigue?
Yeah, that's hard because there are no breaks in this season. Sort of like there's just always something happening, whether it's outdoor, indoor, cross country, high school, college, professional. And that's tough. Oh, there's marathons, all this kind of stuff. And so there are no breaks, but like it is important to kind of take a step back sometimes. And, I think that's where sort of like having a team is important too. If you can't pin, watching 50 track meets a year on one person. Like even I'd get sick of that. As much as our whole mantra and motto is that we love track and field, like there could be a lot of track and field sometimes and a lot of people running in circles. But so I mean, the burnout is tough. And I think like for me professionally, I experienced that, I had the honor of covering like my first Olympics in 2016. And I think like a big reason of like why, Citius Mag started in the first place was because I was experiencing sort of like this Olympic come down. The media gets it too. It's not just the athletes, where you spend so much time focusing on like one particular event. And then it happens and you're like, whoa, the next one is 4 years away. Like, how do I deal with that? And so I had just so much creative output, I think, in between 2012 and 2016, where that was like all I was focused on. And my dream was to make it to the Olympics. And for then all of a sudden to realize like, oh, like no one else is going to care until 2020. Little did we know it'd even be pushed back another year. I was like, that's really hard to face. And so I experienced that burnout. But then what I did was like I created Citius Mag to just, have that outlet afterwards. And so that's sort of what that pivot became, was like, all right, now I have this place on the side where I'm able to let myself just be funny, be analytical, and it's all in my control. And so it's kind of just like finding different ways and different places to, continue to get that creative energy out, even though like there's going to be periods where you're expending so much of that energy.
That's great advice, because I think a lot of times people think that burnout and creativity fatigue happens because you only have this one thing you can be creative around. And if you find other pathways for it, then there's ways to expand that further. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And it's sometimes like trying new things and dabbling with it and seeing like where it goes. Like maybe, all right, you're sick and tired of writing for several years. Try your hand at a podcast and see if that is easier. Like for me, like that's kind of like how I fell into it too. Like with podcasting, I realized it was like, whoa, you're telling me I can do an interview with someone for a whole hour and then not have to worry about transcribing every single word. And then on top of that, crafting like a whole beautiful 2,000 word story around the whole thing. Like that sounds like it's so much easier. So it's like after the moment you stop hitting record, the whole conversation in its entirety could be out for someone to consume within an hour or so. Like that sounded great. Like you don't have to wait for, editor to give you your first draft back and then go through those multiple rounds. And so that's how I fell into sort of like the podcasting medium side of things. And I love it. Like now I'm doing it, every single week, multiple times a week. And, I would never go back to listen to some of the first few episodes because I'm sure like it would, skeeze me out being like, whoa, that was really bad. But over time, just with more practice, like I feel like I've gotten better and I still know I've got, more ways to go with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, part of the reason why we created Name Drop, there were lots of reasons, but I started Indie because I am a marketer. And then I've gotten to the place with the business where I'm not on client work anymore. So I'm not creating. And I was like, this feels like a stalemate for me, right? Like I want to be making something. And so when we decided to do the podcast, I felt like totally re-energized again. Okay, well now I have a different type of outlet that I can build around, which it's been great. But I agree, like definitely lots of practice needed, like it's a continuum until you probably run out of juice on this and then pivot to something else.
Yeah. And I think like the toughest part is sticking with it. Like when maybe it ultimately it depends on like what your goal is with whatever it is you choose to do. Like, are you trying to climb the Apple top charts to be right up there with Travis Kelce and, you know, all the Pardon My Take and all these other sports shows? Like, no, I'm focused on creating a product that maybe all runners or, you know, track and field fans will enjoy or can rely on. And so in the same way, like, you got to know, you know, what your own measures of success are. Like, is it just, you know, I take pride in the fact that I'm, you know, doing 10 interviews a season of, you know, of a show or whatever it is, and like all of them are going to be badass, and if you find them 6 months from now or whatever, like, then they're great. Like, so it's like, I think everyone just needs to know, one, I think, know your audience, and two, know what your goals are with anything that you try and set out to.
Yeah, for sure.
And goals can change over time too.
Yes, they usually do.
Yeah.
So what relationship has been most impactful on you professionally?
Oh, wow. This is a great question. I think, you know, for me, it was, I'm trying to think if, like, am I still supposed to be much of a secret here? I think I've given away, like,
you've pretty much given away. You can just give away.
Yeah. Well, so it's like, I spent, you know, 6.5 years at Sports Illustrated. And so I think that for me, my time there was valuable because I got to work with some amazing, you know, editors, both on the website of things and in the magazine side of things. And I learned how to kind of quarterback a newsroom. My job was to be the breaking news editor of a team of, you know, I think at one point we had, you know, over 10 writers. And so it was really cool because every day was interesting. I didn't know what the big story was going to be. And so there was that level of excitement going into work every single day. And then, you know, I was in one of the writer's shoes when I started as a fellow coming out of college for a whole year. And, you know, I'd turn in some writing and it'd get ripped up and I'd have to take another pass at it. And, you know, I got the chance to work with a variety of different editors. So through that, I always was one of those people who was like, just tear me apart. Like, I think that's how you learn from your mistakes the best. And so to be surrounded by some of the best in the industry was great because I learned so much in that process, and I still sort of have a lot of those skills that I use to manage a team of 10 writers covering, you know, anything that could have happened. You could have told me Tom Brady broke his leg in a game and I had to assign it to a writer and be like, you got to get me that story in the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And it's really fast paced. And then I've edited the story and they make the changes or I make the changes, and then it's shot over to the social media team after it's published. And so it's really fast paced, and that gave me really good practice for what I do now when I can show up to an event and oversee, again, another team of 10 doing a variety of different things across different channels. And so, you know, I really do give that up to, you know, my editors at Sports Illustrated. In particular, I think like one was Ryan Hunt, who was like the co-editor-in-chief of Sports Illustrated. And when I started Sidious Mag, like he kind of, at first, like it was started off as like a blog on the side, like, again, just a little side hustle. Never thought this thing would become like an actual full-time job or a money-making venture. Just another place for me to geek out on the sport. And I kind of had to downplay it, like in my first ever conversation about it when I got called into an office, like, what are you doing? Because I didn't ask for permission at the very beginning to start this. I don't know if I was violating my contract or whatever it was, but he gave me the green light. He was like, as long as you set a line that's like, you know, if you're breaking news stories or writing features, like, it's obviously got to go to Sports Illustrated, never using Sports Illustrated for access or anything like that. And so I was good with all the, you know, the rules that were set. And he was like, and then anything else you want to do, like to geek out or whatever it is, it's in the weeds, like just, you know, do it on your own place. And it's like, I didn't have to bug my editors with like all this extra stuff that I was passionate about. Because the crazy part is, like, at the end, you know, maybe that meeting, he could have squashed the whole idea of what my full-time job is now.
Yeah.
And that would have been the end of it. Yeah. And so for him to give me sort of like, it was like a yellow light of sorts to be like, all right, cautiously, like, proceed.
Right.
It worked out. And like, I never broke the rules, and I found that great balance. And, you know, it was cool. But when at the time in December 2021, when I ultimately had to have the conversation with him, it was like, hey, I'm choosing to leave Sports Illustrated to go full time. And that's what I said. And he's like, well, where are you going? And I was like, I'm going to go do my thing full time. And he was like, kind of expected that this day would come, which was really cool to hear. And so, I'm really thankful for just sort of like that environment at SI, which was able to just, you know, help me sharpen my skill set and allow me to develop a lot of skills that I use to this day now.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's not always the case, so that's very cool to hear.
So I got lucky there too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so tell us who you are. Tell us about Sidious.
Yeah, big surprise here, I guess. I'm Chris Chavez, and I'm the founder of Sidious Mag, a digital media entity covering all things track and field, running, the Olympics. And so we do that across, you know, every single platform, I feel like, at this point, where it's like, I host a weekly podcast. We've got newsletters. We've got, you know, our Instagram channels, TikTok, Threads, wherever, you know, kind of my whole approach is let's storytell around some of the best athletes in the world, and scale it up and try and welcome in new fans. And our mission at the end of the day is just make it easier, you know, to follow track and field and the sport, because it's one that is fairly fractured and broken and old and run in some very old school ways. And so I'm here to bring a little bit of a new school approach. Kind of disrupts things a little bit sometimes, but that's a good thing.
That is a good thing, for sure. Amazing. So what does an average day in the life look like? Yeah,
it's interesting because like when I left SI, my first day was like January 3rd, 2022. And that was a very quiet, like now, you know, we're talking in June 2020 or May 2024. And there's so much to follow along, especially in the ramp up to the Olympics. But at that point, I was like, I woke up and I was like, what do I do today? Like, do I just go record a podcast? What? And so like, I've kind of really learned to, in addition to being on the content creator side of things, where I love, you know, interviewing people and jumping on breaking news and all that stuff. Like, I still have that instinct in me. There's a business side of things too that I have to kind of manage now. So it was definitely a learning period, and I feel like I still am in that learning period of being a full-on business owner and calling the shots, running payroll, and you know the deal. And it's so there's still a bunch that I'm learning, but you know, my day consists of, you know, scheduling out podcast interviews and checking in with, you know, the producer on my team or someone who's handling social. We do kind of like a whole all staff meeting in the month leading up to things to kind of establish like who's going where, what's our plan, who are we working with. And so, you know, it's a lot of calls, a lot of computer time. My chiropractor hates me. Like, I'm just sitting and my posture's terrible. And so, so I mean, a lot of calls around not just interview and the creative side of things, but, you know, locking down money to go cover events. And I think like for us, like our business model is a lot of it is just like, you know, all these brands and want us to cover their events and go be essentially the hype people for the sport and their particular athletes or whatever they have going on. And so, you know, managing a whole calendar of things, it's like, okay, we're going to go to this event with this brand and this event with that brand. And, you know, it's me and my colleague, Mac Fleet, have to sit through, you know, a lot of these calls and handle those conversations. And, you know, it's fun because, you know, in retrospect, like I think of 2022, you know, starting off full time, I was asking for pennies,
right.
And the brands were quick to say, yes, you know, we'll hire you for that much money. And now, you know, we start to have a feel for like what we're worth and, you know, advocating for that. And so the conversations can, you know, sometimes go a little bit more back and forth. And so that side of things has also been really fun. But a lot of calls. And at the same time, a lot of watching people run in circles. But, you know, that's all fun for me.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, so many great points made. I think it's interesting as a founder when you do look back at the early days. Like I had similar experience of being like, I had all these business structures in place in my previous jobs that I didn't even realize were there. And then you go out on your own without all of that and you're like, so what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, what things do I have to focus on? And then you straddle the line of trying to build a business, but also be the person on the ground, doing the work, being the face. And it's a really interesting transition to then getting to a place where you're the one running the business and you realize, oh my God, I need to figure out how to be a business owner.
Yeah.
And that's such a different skill set.
It is. Yeah.
So it's lots of different parts of the brain always being used.
100%. And like sometimes, I have to, tell myself, it's like, do I need to go to this event? Can I send someone else? Like, I don't have the same energy as I did when I was 21, or even just sort of like I have more responsibilities. And so like, I can't just choose to go on this trip because it's more fun, or like these athletes are going to be there. And so maybe there's like a record setting performance. I have to create those opportunities and delegate those responsibilities now, where I'm like, all right, well, do we have a younger person and give them that opportunity to go cover that event? Do I trust them? Have we given them enough reps beforehand to, get them in our system and know how we go about operating? So, there's planning on that side of things so that I don't necessarily have to be at every single thing. But part of me, sometimes does have FOMO and it's like, I wish I was at that track meet. But instead, like, we sent someone, the job got taken care of, and that's great. And then other times, like, I do have to be at things because, I have to, be there to handle the relationships with these brands that are paying us, some really good money to be there, and also to, put out fires. I just got back from my bachelor party like 2 weeks ago, and I tried my best to disconnect off my phone. There was a big track meet that was happening that same weekend, and I couldn't make it. Matt couldn't make it. And my former colleague now, Kyle Merber, couldn't make it. Like, we're the three, guys who own Citius Mag and like oversee a lot of day-to-day stuff. So we dispatch a team to the Penn Relays taking place in Philadelphia. And it was on them to kind of, take over the creative direction and like what was going up on social media. I asked to be put on the group chat because I needed to, be checking in. And so I said, we cannot go out into the open water, like on a boat, and I lose service and I have no idea what's happening. So there's still sort of like that, that's the startup, part of things where it's like you still want to be involved in a lot of the smaller decisions that are made.
Yeah, no, I'm struggling with this right now. The FOMO is real.
100%.
I know no one feels bad for us because they really don't, but it's like, I want to be there. That's the fun stuff.
Because ultimately, like, whatever the actual work that's getting done, it's a reflection of you.
Totally. Yeah, no, we have 2 big client events in the next month, and I'm not going to either one. And I'm like, how did this happen? And I know it's a good thing, right? Like, that means that the business is going beyond me, and it means great things for Indy, but it's also, it's just FOMO. And it's like a little bit of being afraid, like, I hope it's going to go okay. And how can I set people up for success? And it's different.
The morning after, you're just asking all the questions, the recap of like, how did it go? Was this person happy? Yeah. Like, did you see this person? Did you talk to them? Yeah, I 100% get it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So how has your experience as a professional changed since starting Citius? I mean, you've talked a little bit about this, but what's been your biggest learning?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like figuring out what it is that you do well, and where it fits in the grand scheme of things. And you can set out and start a media company, but you have to realize like who else is already doing stuff out there, and what are they doing well, and do you still fit in? Like, who's your competitor and who's not? And so, I think in the grand scheme of things, like that first year, we kind of got lucky in a sense the first couple times. Like, we did like a post-game show from a track meet once, and like it really wasn't all that planned out. Like, we just said, we'll sit down and talk to some athletes after the meet ends, and just sort of like the natural sort of chemistry that the athletes had with us and our laid-back approach to things, our overall just sort of knowledge of the sport and what just happened came in handy, where it's like, oh wow, all of a sudden we had like this post-game show to a track meet, which doesn't really happen. You tune into one of these events, and when it's over, you get an episode of Shark Tank or whatever it might be. Whereas with other sports, that's not the case. Like, there's just always that carryover when you get your audience feeling super excited about what they just saw. Now there's these people talking about it and analyzing things, and it's not a thing. So we fill that gap by just doing it, and by accident that became like something that was a really strong product for us. And so now we can do that at, a variety of different events. And it became just sort of like one of these things that's like, oh, that's now one of our big offerings to things, is that we can come into your event and beforehand set up the storylines, and afterwards unpack everything that happened. The athletes love us. We love the athletes. It just all meshes so well. And so, kind of that became a thing that we did. And if you would have asked me sort of like January 1st of 2022, what is it that we do well? I would have said it was like, oh, podcasts and newsletters and all that stuff. But then like now we just kind of created a whole nother channel to, a faucet to turn on that makes money as well. And so, kind of that helped us, get better clarity on where we live in the whole space. Like, yes, you have NBC who streams all the things, or ESPN, or all these different, streaming services that actually put on the events, and that's how you watch it. But no one actually tells you like, oh, this thing's on this one and this one's on this one. And we see ourselves as like the agnostic, place to get all that information. Again, the mission is make it easy to follow. And so we're okay telling you this is here, this is there, this is how you watch it, because ultimately more eyeballs on the sport is a good thing for us. Whereas a lot of other people kind of view it as like, we have this product and we got to protect, and look out for this event. And so it gets very sort of territorial, and we definitely want to approach it more as like, no, like we're okay, telling people where things are, even if some of these places see us as competitors or whatever it might be. And it just all comes back to our mission of making it easier. And so where we really thrive, again, is sort of like the pre and the post of an event, making people care about like what athletes I should watch out for, what are the big storylines, and how do I watch it. And then afterwards, like when it's all said and done, you come to us because we're on 10, we're excited, we're talking about it, we're on YouTube, we're having a great time. So like we've created sort of like these two places where like, and then, while it's all happening, you just watch it when it's on TV or you stream it, and we'll be there at the event getting you interviews that you can watch on YouTube. And so basically it's a long way of saying it's like, I learned that it's like, we're staying out of, all the little fights that people get in over like, I need to stream this and I own the rights to this. And we're just like, we're going to do our thing in the places that there's more opportunity to be the storytellers in the whole space. And so, that's, that was my biggest sort of learning, and helped shape a lot of like our day-to-day stuff after that too.
Yeah. Interesting. No, it's a good take on like, I think it's easy to get lost in the sauce of thinking about your competitors as threats all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's a useless exercise. Yeah. There's more than enough opportunity to go around. And if you can just stay focused on that and stay away from the, oh, well, we're worried. I mean, we have that, right? Like, what if this agency comes in or they try to take this service? And if you have your point of focus, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I kind of get, it's frustrating too, because it's sort of like you want to convey that in like the easiest way, in like the most simple way possible. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like I try and tell some of these powers that be that hold the keys to these things, it's like, stop seeing us as a competitor. Instead, sort of like we're a media company, but I also think of us as like marketing and PR for the sport of track and field.
Yeah.
And so like if we can benefit you guys by getting more of our audience and more of our eyeballs, which we've got like that 18 to 34 demographic on lock, which is like what a lot of people are struggling with, like then like take down some of the red tape and like the barriers to entry and let us help you get more eyeballs on your thing, because like we've got the eyes. It's just sort of like we can't show or talk or do certain things because there's rules in place. Right. And so yeah, it's hard because it's like people have done things the same way for a long time, and so they're set in their ways and they view us as competitors, and it's hard to change people's minds sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you see as the biggest opportunity for Citius in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the key stakeholders in the sport just continue to point to like I'm talking like the governing bodies and like the big federations are like LA 2028 is going to be huge because that's when the Olympics come back to the United States. And so there's a big ramp up to that. And like they've said, their whole goal is to make track a top 5 sport in America. I mean, that'd be great for business for us. But like, I think that you can't set the goalpost in the finish line, pun intended, I guess, like at LA 2028, because that's an Olympics, and like that's like when the sport is at its healthiest. That's when the stands are going to be full. That's when, you know, if that's your measure of success, you're going to pat yourself. I can tell you right now, you're going to pat yourself on the back because it's going to look great, and that's no problem. I think it's really the years in between where you got to buckle down and reassess and try new things to, you know, find those audiences and get people excited and just make it easier for people to follow. That's where we come in. And so there's a big opportunity, especially if there's going to be more people coming off of the Paris Olympics who are going to be interested in track. There's a Netflix series that's going to be coming out, and like, who knows like what the effects of that are going to be when we've seen it successfully, you know, translated in other sports that, you know, great storytelling is going to get people invested in your star athletes. And so if it's done well, then hopefully we get some of that trickle down effect. And so being involved in some of these new things and having, you know, an attachment to them will hopefully pay off dividends for us as we continue to build our audience. Like, it's been year after year, like really steady growth for us across all channels. Like, I look at this sort of pitch deck that we send out to potential partners all the time, and I take great pride in sort of like seeing those charts grow. We've never spent $1 to buy a follower or subscriber or whatever it might be. And so it's all organic. And, you know, when you look at the comment section of one of our posts, like, there's tons of engagement. And so, you know, that's the part that's really fulfilling, is that, you know, we've created this online community of sorts that like people sometimes struggle to find, you know, and so that's always rewarding. And then at the same time, just sort of realizing that it's not just online. Like, when we show up to an event, you know, and we decide to put on a group run, I'm always nervous that there's going to be like 5 people who show up. But when there's 100 people showing up on your front lawn and they're looking forward to the run, and they're finding all these other, you know, track nerds of sorts who also consume your content and like what you do, that's really rewarding, because it's like, okay, you created a space now where like in real life too, people can find potential new friends or whatever it might be, other like-minded people who also just happen to be really passionate about the sport that isn't like super popular. Yeah. So that's rewarding, I think, at the end of it, when you have those hard days that go long and, you know, deep into the night. And I remember like being up, you know, at 1 a.m. editing a podcast, you know, back in the day, and I'd be like, what am I doing this for? Like, why don't I just like shut this down and like get some more sleep and just focus on doing my job at SI? But no, like, it's worth it when you have, you know, that random person come up to you at the Berlin Marathon Expo and is like, hey, I really love your podcast. And I was like, whoa, like, it found someone out all the way out here. Like, that's really cool. And so continuing to do more of that, yeah, we'll see where it goes.
That's awesome. At 21, did you ever think you would be where you are now?
21, 9 years ago? No, because I think like at that point I was covering, I was at Sports Illustrated, just getting started. And I kind of saw that as just like, I could have been there forever.
Sure. Well,
as long as Sports Illustrated was around, like, that's a whole nother thing too. Is sort of, it's this, I call it the Titanic of sports magazines. Like, it's amazing. And there had been moments when like the Titanic looks like it's about to sink, and, you know, they're in hot water and there's massive layoffs, and round after round, like, it survived multiple rounds of layoffs. And that was great. But I sort of did, you know, build my own life raft off of it. And now it's a nice boat. Maybe it turns into a yacht someday. I don't know. Just to stay on that analogy. But yeah, so I mean, like, that, when I was 21, maybe I just saw myself as like a writer, and I really probably just wanted to get to the level of like writing some kick-ass magazine stories. But I think it really did take going to the Olympics, experiencing that burnout right afterwards, and testing new things for me to find sort of more of that creative outlet and output that I have. And I didn't think that like this little blog on the side was going to become, you know, a digital media company.
Yeah, for sure. But you also put yourself out there, and I think that's really scary. I know, like, we've talked about this before. It's like there's a risk associated with like building that life raft in the beginning.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that?
Yeah, it is. Well, I think it got a little bit better, I think, sort of like when you start to put yourself out there. And I noticed that when I was at Sports Illustrated, I'd write these stories or, break some news on Twitter, whatever it was, and people would consume it, and that's great. But like, it's very easy to scroll past like a name when you're reading a story. Like if you think about it, like you open a New York Times article, you're not necessarily like fixated on who wrote it.
Right.
And you just get your news fix and move on. And I think that pivoting to the approach that we take with Sidious, that definitely put me out there a bit more, where sort of like I'm on my podcast, people can now hear what I sound like or watch me in videos and all that stuff. And, being on Instagram and more forward facing in front of a camera, like people get to see you now. And like, I think that in a way you have to be okay with that. Like you got to remember, you're never going to please every single person out there. You're going to have tons of critics online or whatever it might be. And you have to kind of get comfortable with it over time. And so, yeah, it does it's an adjustment period, but now, then again, like over time, as you build that platform and it grows, that's more eyeballs on you. Like it does get nerve-wracking at times.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm going to keep my Instagram a little bit more professional because I don't need some of these random runners who follow me to know what's going on in like my personal life or whatever it might be. That's a challenge too. And sometimes like, yeah, you wish you could just like take a step back and be a little bit more, anonymous. But yeah, it comes with, the cost of, growing something and being public facing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think remembering that, for each one of the critics or haters, there's usually way more positive people, but you hear the negative ones.
Oh gosh.
They're louder, right?
Oh yeah.
And like right after I left Ben & Jerry's to start Indie, I ran into one of my old colleagues like at a bar, and he was making fun of, like, he like was like, oh, the company's name is Indie? Like, that's so lame, basically is what he was saying. And I remember being like so shook by this experience. But then you put it into perspective. You took a step back. Like, way more people were like, oh, it's awesome you're doing this, versus that one person.
Yeah.
And you should have to silence it. Like,
100%.
Whatever,
Yeah, I have learned to not check the running message boards and like, shut that out. I will occasionally ask someone on my team and be like, what are they saying? And like get the secondhand sort of information. But yeah, I mean, like the first couple, I guess like you can get a ton of positive podcast reviews, but the one that says like, oh, Chris has got a whiny voice, like that one stays with me, like even to this day. And so I'm constantly thinking about that. But no, I think like over time, the positivity outweighs everything else for sure.
Definitely. Okay, so let's do a quick round of trendy or tragic.
Oh, okay.
To wrap it up. So I'll give a topic. You tell me what you think. So apparently Snapchat is having a renaissance with the youth.
All right.
Snapchat back on the scene. Trendy or tragic?
I don't know. Like, I think like it's one of those. I don't have it. So like I don't know if like it has. Isn't it like a big potential asset for someone else to acquire? Like I think that's what it's probably shiny for. So I would say trending because like it's something for someone else to buy. Yeah.
Okay. I like that take.
Like, right? Like, everyone's buying someone else right now, I feel like. So, yeah, someone buy it.
Yeah. And then do something different with it.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Or just integrate it and improve whatever AI is already on it. Yeah.
Okay. I like that. The Tom Brady roast.
Oh, I just woke up and saw clips about this thing. It looked amazing.
So you haven't watched it yet?
I haven't watched it in its entirety.
Okay.
But I was glued to a bunch of the clips and I was like, oh my gosh, like Netflix, that was gold for them. And again, like it kind of goes to this, earlier talking point where it's like, sometimes like what you see on a traditional TV broadcast is like, all right, it's like the post game interview and everyone's still kind of like polished. Mm-hmm. But this Netflix roast, from the clips that I've seen, I mean, it was R-rated material of like all these top stars. Like making just such lewd jokes that I was like, wow, like when they talk about football locker room talk, like this is it, and it's on Netflix. Wow. So trending, and it gets you thinking too. Like Netflix is probably right now having meetings being like, all right, so who do we do with that with next? And it's like sport, like if they are going to make this pivot into live sports, which everyone seems to want, then you gotta think like, can we get Michael Jordan for this, like David Beckham, like whoever it might be, like just lean in. Like it was great.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't seen it yet. I want to watch it. I think what Netflix is doing with comedy at large is amazing.
I haven't watched the Mulaney thing either yet, but like I heard it's amazing.
And the whole like Netflix is a joke series thing that they're doing right now, it's impressive. But I also give Tom Brady a ton of kudos for like putting himself out there, because some of the things I read, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
They went right for it.
Yeah, to be just sitting there, because like when Comedy Central used to do like the roast, like some of them were good, others weren't like all that great, but it just seemed like they assembled a cast and said, no, nothing's off limits here. And it got heated. Yeah. Or just like, I can't believe they were making those jokes. Like I think said that to yourself many times watching this thing.
Yeah. It's cool to see. The Equinox $40,000 a year membership.
Oh, I don't know about this.
Okay, so they just released a new membership that's $40,000 a year, and it's something about like creating your optimal self, and it's a private training, like access to the gym at different times, and nutrition coaching, and you pay $40,000 a year to be a part of it.
I'd love to meet the people who were the guinea pigs, like to test this whole thing out, because that sounds just too much. Well, the price is ridiculous. So what was it? Is trending, or what was
tragic?
Tragic. This one's tragic. Like it doesn't take that much to like just be healthy. Get yourself just a regular. I mean, you don't even need a gym membership sometimes. Like if we learn anything from the pandemic, to push running onto people, like you can just get out the door and run, and that's exercise, and that's great. And so then just if I could spend $40,000 better to keep myself healthy in different ways, I feel like.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Also, if you're paying that kind of money, then you need to be having people like on demand.
Yeah.
And that would be annoying to me.
100%.
So,
or just invasive. Like
yes,
that
agree.
person, third party person is like, you had a Kit Kat bar last night. Like then all of a sudden you're just you're venturing off into a very dark place with like eating stuff, and you don't even want to go there. My first thought was just like, what is the goal of this thing? Is it like create like hundreds of Patrick Batemans like from American Psycho like walking around? Like that was the first thing that came to mind. It's like, who's buying this? That it would be someone like that. And those people were psychotic.
Yep. Crazy. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was super fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great. Of
course. Tell us where we can find you and Sidious.
Yeah, so Sidious Mag, it's Citius Mag. There actually has never been a magazine. That's like the thing that like when I started it was the first idea. But now the people who find it were like, oh, it must have been a magazine at some point. Never been a magazine. Maybe someday. But Sidious Mag on all platforms. And then myself personally, it's Chris_J_Chavez on Instagram. I gotta find a way to buy that handle from the guy who has it. It's been dormant, not that active, and so and then the Sidious Mag podcast on all podcast players. If you want to get into track and field before the Paris Olympics, like that's your go-to place. Or if you even just want to follow the sport, I just tell people the easiest way is just follow us on Instagram, and you'll learn a lot more about who Noah Lyles is and what Sha'Carri Richardson doing before, the Paris Olympics. So, it's going to be a busy next couple months, but I'm here for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So you guys can find us on Instagram at namedrop.pod, and I'm at Malbakes. Thanks so much.